something you guys talk about is journalists getting too involved.
Mm.
Um, and if that's really a thing, how it's the difference between daring enough to be truthful rather than neutral. And
Mhm.
the quote goes on to say, our profession's golden rule of objectivity does not mean drawing a false moral equivalence between aggressor and victim.
It's a very important point, actually, about journalists, and in particular today, when there doesn't seem to be anything that's close to objectivity, because journalism has become, like everything else, sort of politicized in ways that are toxic and negative. Our journalists have become advocates for points of view. But I think what Christiane is referring to there is when she reported on the Bosnian War with such passion, and as she revealed to the world for the first time the atrocities of that war, she wasn't being objective. She was saying, this is horrific, what is happening here. And she did it with a kind of passion that some people interpreted, I think, as advocacy for one side or the other, and criticized her for not being objective. I'm just remembering this was part of what she talked to me about then, because we were working together at that time. So but I don't think she's saying that it's okay for journalists to be partisan. That's not the same as being engaged and passionate and truthful. And truth is the big word here. What she's saying is telling the truth is what's important, um, not the importance of being or seeming to be objective about the truth. Truth isn't subjective, truth, we forgot that during the 4 years of our last president. Truth actually is an absolute.
Yes.
So I don't want to speak for Christiane and how she might be thinking about that, because she says it so beautifully there. But I do remember the early days of her reporting from the front lines of war, and I ran into it constantly in my reporting. I was always told, oh, you're playing the women's card. You're always speaking up and advocating for women. And yes, I was, because often their points of view were not being presented without some sort of fervent advocacy, but there was truth too in what I wanted to report about them.
Yeah. I think that's such an important point, and it is so like murky. It's such a
Yeah,
murky area
it
that it's
is.
like
It's
hard
very.
to talk about. I find myself having conversations with people about like journalism and objectivity and what happens if a journalist gets too close to a story so much that they have a feeling about it. Because I would also argue, is it are you aren't we human? Like humanity is such a huge part of storytelling
Yeah.
and of journalism. So maybe it's more truthful to be truthful about how you're feeling about what you're talking about,
Yeah.
whether like, so being honest about your feelings while also sharing the truth of the story. It's like this weird balance that I think that but uncovering. We're in a really weird time, I think, for journalists, and I would actually argue that a lot of local journalists try really hard to be as objective as possible with their storytelling, where it becomes way more political. Um, the higher up you go, and
Hmm.
you do make that hit
Yeah.
that national stage.